everyone. My name is Cindy Shearrer, and I am a law librarian at the Mizzou Law Library. Happy to have everybody that's here in person. We're small but mighty here in person, and then those of you who are joining us online. I have been a law librarian at the Mizzou Law Library since 1997, which, you know, for those of you in the room, that's maybe before you were even born, right? But so it's been a while, and I don't know everything, but I do have a good grasp on the resources that we have. And I think if you get anything out of this session today, I'm going to go ahead and click on my name here. If you just remember that you can contact me, if you just Google Cindy Shearrer contact, you'll come up with this page. So those of you online will see what I look like now. And it's got a phone number there and an email. So shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one. We have a disparate group here that signed up, which is great. We've got grad students, we've got undergrads, we've got faculty, and even a staff member that have signed up. So I suspect there's varying needs in terms of what you are interested in learning today. Today's session is pretty broad, but those of you, I've already talked to the people that are in the session here today. Those of you who are online listening right now, if you would go ahead in the chat and just, if you have a particular question that you want me to cover, go ahead and type that in. I'll do my best to cover what I can. My guess, when I was kind of preparing this presentation, was that most of us fall in the category of we're either needing to learn about law and legal research because we have personal reasons. At any point in our life, we're going to need to draw, have a will. We might have to go to a lawyer to do that, but it'd been kind of nice to do, do some background research ourselves. We might even be able, if it's simple enough, at the stage of life you're at, maybe you can do your own. But even if you're going to see a lawyer, it's kind of nice to do some background information. Maybe you've got a parent that is ill and you need to get a power of attorney form. There's all kinds of, maybe you're, hope not, but unfortunately having to go through a divorce. Even if you're going to be seeing a lawyer, it's nice to get some background information. So that's kind of a sign. And then we've got a question online.
Or somebody said they're looking at laws related to public health and health policy.
Okay, we have one person online who's looking at laws related to public health and health policy. So I would call that more so I talk about personal reasons, and then we may also have more that may fall in the line of academic reasons. And and that's one of them. I may have actually talked to that patron at one point in time, and so I hope that I can give you kind of a groundwork for doing that kind of research, and we'll talk about some approaches that you can take for that. So as you have questions, if you're listening online, please type those in. I want to allow time to speak to those questions. But before we get started, all right, let me just sort of give you the dollar's worth, all right? Let me give you a maybe 60-second, might be 2-minute tour of, if I could just tell you real quickly what I would do to learn about legal research, this is it, all right? So I would go, first of all, I would say, to the Law Library homepage, and I'm going to click on it. Now, all you have to do, you know these things. You can just Google University of Missouri Law Library. You'll get to this page. You don't have to memorize the URL. From this page, we have a legal research pull-down menu, and one of the options that I would recommend is this Research a Topic option. Those of you who are familiar with Ellis Library LibGuides, they've got a lot of them. We've got a few of them, okay? For example, you can see here case law research. If you needed to figure out how to research cases, that'd be a good one to look at. The one I'm going to highlight, I'm not going to spend much time here today, but I'm going to highlight it. It's free and low-cost legal research. This is just kind of a nice place to go if you want to have kind of a launch pad for what we would consider to be good legal resources that are freely available on the internet. And then we've also got some options here that are I would call low-cost options. FastCase is an interesting one. It is provided free for anybody who is an attorney. So all attorneys in Missouri with their Missouri bar membership have access to FastCase, and it's pretty affordable. Well, it's really affordable to attorneys because it's free. But then also we've got these internet resources. So that's one place that you could start. Now here's another place that I would recommend, and I'm going to click right here on the Law Library page. We'll just go here, back to the Law Library page. We also have, most of you who are in this program, I think everyone who's in the program is associated with the university. So you have access to the databases that we have access to. So also Underneath research databases, we have this link for more databases, or underneath legal research is where I usually go, online resources. So this is our online resource page. I'm going to click on databases by subject. So these are all kind of the windows into the databases that the law library subscribes to. And we'll be looking at some of those today. And most of there are some that we were only able to afford to access for law students, but most of them are available from home, office, logging in through the proxy server, using your paw print. And we'll look at, particularly we'll look at Hein today, Hein database, which provides law reviews, which is a great secondary resource for learning about legal topics. So we'll look at that one. That's the one in particular that we'll look at, but there are others as well. If you are interested in historical statutory research, for example, we have some databases with that. So we'll take a look at some of those. And then finally, I would say that, I'm going to try to get back to my PowerPoint. Here we go. The final thing that I would say, I don't really have a picture of it, so I'm going back to the PowerPoint slide. In the law library, we have 2 dedicated terminals for Westlaw. It's a Westlaw Public, and I'm going to show you today, I'm going to be able to, I've fixed it so that I can log into it from here today. Unfortunately, that's not one that you can use from your office or from home. It's just too expensive, but we have 2 terminals. It's fantastic. I wish that I could provide remote access. I can't, but I'm at least introduce you to that today, because that is a very rich resource that may be worth your while, depending upon what you're doing, to come to the library to use that. And then, of course, we have print materials in the library as well. So this is kind of the foundation for how I'm going to approach just the next 50 minutes that we have together. We're going to talk about some tips for just how to get started with whatever your legal research questions are. We're going to talk about kind of, I hope this isn't boring for you, all right, but I feel like I have to go over some of the framework of the United States law, because that's how everything is published. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some stuff I'll remind you of what you already know, but that I think will help to put the resources in place. And then along the way, we're just going to talk about the resources and the places that you would go to for that information. So the getting started part, and I'm talking pretty fast here, so raise your hand, type in questions, help me to pause as we go if we need to. So what is your question? I mean, that's kind of I don't even hardly know how to answer that myself, all right? Because a lot of it is like, you don't know what you don't know. But think about when you're getting ready to do legal research, what are you asking for? I have so many people who come to the reference desk and give me long stories, and it's like, I can't be a lawyer. I can't advise you, but I can help you get to the resources. So how can we take this really complicated situation that you're dealing with and figure out where we can go to learn more about it? So just as best as you can, think about what is it that you're asking that we might be able to help with. And a big part of that is jurisdiction. This is something I never really thought about before I went into the law library world. You know, if I am a grandma and my kid got divorced and I want to have visitation rights with my grandkid, well, the laws on that might be different in Missouri than they are in Illinois, because that's kind of a state issue. So think about that placement. Where is the issue happening? Thinking about courts, you know, we've got state courts, we've got federal courts. They deal with different issues and they have different publications. State courts deal with most of the stuff. You know, most crimes end up in a state court. Divorce, traffic violations, probate, inheritance, all of that state court stuff. You know, Boone County, think about all the reasons you could have to go down that Boone County courthouse. That's state court stuff. Federal court, not maybe as many issues, but wow, they can have that national importance. You know, you hear about the U.S. Supreme Court cases because they affect the whole country. And they take on particular topics like constitutional law. If maybe there's a Missouri law that people are saying that's not constitutional, that could end up in the U.S. Supreme Court, you know, so that the federal court side. Federal courts deal with bankruptcy, copyright. You mentioned you were interested in copyright. Federal courts end up with that. if there were two citizens in two different states who had a conflict, which court you go to? You know, Kansas court or Missouri? Well, you might end up in federal court in that kind of a situation. So there's just jurisdictional questions. Quickly, just to finish this, the other thing that you have to kind of think about in thinking about your question is the time frame. You wanting to do historical research, or you have an issue that happened in 1980, you know, it's like, what was the law in 1980? It might be different than today. So just thinking about time frame. Okay, this is the framework. This is basically how we teach the law students legal research here in these two categories of information. Secondary sources, that's where I recommend anyone start. I mean, when I don't, you know this, from whatever area of academic that you're in, if you don't know about something, isn't it great to find a good book about it, you know, or an article? If I'm going to do something with civil rights, I don't want to just search for a civil rights case. Maybe I do, there could be reasons, all right, but I'd really rather have an article that kind of speaks to the particular area that I'm interested in so I can get some background information from an expert. And so the law is the same way, you know, start with books, you know, we call them treatises, and they always have to sound fancy in the law world. We wouldn't call them books. No, they're treatises, but really they're just books that treat a subject of law extensively. So there's categories of secondary sources, and then the category of what I would call primary source, which is in other, you know, academic areas as well, you would use those categories. So in the law, the primary material is the law. What's the law? Well, I don't have it up there, but Constitution, number one, that's kind of the super statute over everything, has to be from the Constitution. Statutes, this is branches of government, okay? So you've got the legislative branch of government, gives us our statutes. The executive branch of government gives us our regulations. We'll probably spend the least amount of time on regulations today. Judicial branch of government gives us our case law. So that's the law, is Constitution, statutes, regulations, cases. Okay, questions so far? All right, let's look at secondary authority then. Secondary authority, as I mentioned, will help you to find and understand the law. Find is a big part of it. You know, I think I might need to have case law on a particular topic. Believe me, there are so many cases out there that have been published. If you do a keyword search looking for cases, that is really not the most helpful way to start. Getting a good secondary source, and I'll list them here, you know, a legal encyclopedia, maybe a law review article, book that will help in the footnoting to point me to the seminal case on a particular issue. That's so much more helpful than a keyword search would be on those kind of resources. So let's just take a look right now at what we could do to find a law review article, for example, on a particular topic. I'm at the law school law library homepage, and I'm going to go to legal research and online sources, and I'm going to go to databases by subject, and one of the options, legal periodicals, full text. This takes me to a number of databases, kind of like categorizes different kinds of legal law reviews and whatnot. I always choose this law journal library because it's very large, has a lot of the law reviews in it. And so this takes us to a database called Hein Online. I don't know if any of you have ever used, some of you have seen some nods, I've used this before. So we're not going to do anything too fancy here, but this is all of the law reviews. It would be like, I always tell the law students, it's like the second floor of the law library. It's huge, right? There's a lot of law reviews. So we're talking, it's always helpful when you're searching online to kind of know the size of your database. This is a big one. I'm going to go ahead and choose advanced search. I mean, we could always just do our little, you know, big box search, but I like going into the advanced search option here. And let's say I got a topic ready for us. Let's say that we were interested in the Affordable Care Act, and in particular, we were interested in how the Affordable Care Act is affecting medical malpractice suits. Okay, so let's put affordable care as a phrase in the text somewhere in our article, and then let's narrow things down a bit and search in the article title field for medical malpractice. And I could I could do a date limit. I didn't on this one, but what we'll get when we get here is we get a lot of articles here that are on point, and it's interesting because actually this first one here is 2018. Really nice how current that is. Looks like a lot of them have something to do with the collateral source rule. I think that has to do with evidence. So like if I were going to sue about my knee, which I sort of feel like doing, but I'm not going to, it would mean the collateral source rule would mean that I don't have to disclose that my insurance did pay for those knee surgeries that I had that didn't work, you know. So that's, anyway, you learn a lot of things when you read about the law. Okay, so we actually have here multiple articles that are dealing with this topic of the Affordable Care Act and medical malpractice. We have 28 articles. I can guarantee you could learn so much by at least 5 of these articles. Probably would just be spot on and would give you a lot of links to the case law and any statutory law that might be out there, and probably mostly case law on this particular one, that you could go for kind of the source of the law. Now I want to show you along the same lines, again we're thinking secondary sources here, and I'm going to go to the Law Library homepage again, and I'm going to go into Westlaw, and so now we're imagining that we are in the law library, okay? Now we want to use those dedicated terminals that I told you about to look up, let's take a new issue. Let's just look at this page for a moment. You can always do the big box search on Westlaw and just go that route. I like to first do a little filtering, so I could click on secondary sources here, and now I'm telling Westlaw I only want to search for secondary sources that might tell me more about the law. And again, I like doing the advanced search when I can. That's the librarian in me, okay? And so this time we're going to do one of the topics with our current administration. There's a lot of deregulation going on, okay? So we're getting rid of a lot of regulations. One of the hot topics, not in probably your world, but in the law world, there's been a lot of talk about nursing home and binding arbitration agreements. I never even heard of that until a few months ago, but basically if you have to unfortunately sign your loved one into a nursing home, you sign all kind of papers. A lot of times people in there signing those papers, they don't realize it, but they have signed an agreement that says if they want to sue, essentially something bad happens, you want to sue, they've signed a way that they would only do that through arbitration, not in the courts. They might not even know that they did that. So there's a lot of hoopla out there about that. And let's just say that we wanted to learn more about that. And so I could put in my advanced search here, arbitration. And then I, again, like using these fields. So I'm going to go for the title field, because you can imagine if I'm making nursing home be in the title, that's going to have my results be a lot tighter and hopefully more relevant. And so this is something that I'm getting back. One of the things that I actually like that came up first here is it's called an ALR, American Law Reports. Unfortunately, this one is not available on Hein. These are very in-depth kind of articles. They'll have a table of cases in there. I love the ALRs when you can find one on topic. And that is something that you would have to come and find. There are some things on Westlaw, I guess is what I'm saying, that aren't available on the Hein Online. So let's get back to our PowerPoint. And remember, we were just kind of thinking, how could we learn more about a legal issue? And so we've looked mostly in terms of what we just did was with law review articles. And I mentioned that Hein Online is a resource that you can use from your office, but at the same time might be worth your while to go to the library to use these dedicated Westlaw terminals, because you might get some additional materials there. Any questions about secondary sources? All right, well, let's move on to the law. 3 areas, and we're going to focus on 2 of them: case law, statutory law, and regulatory law. I have to admit my ignorance, which was great when I first started in law libraries. I think I just thought of the law as the legislature, it's like that they pass the laws, all right, but the law is the courts, the case law, that's law. And there's such a thing as precedents and all of that. And we won't go into all of the details with the case law stuff, but the case law, the statutory law, and then the regulations also have the force of law. So all of that is an area that we need to look into. Now, I think, and just hang with me, I'll kind of scoot through this quickly because I know you know this stuff, but I just want to remind you that we've got the two court system, federal and state. And remember how things work. You've got like a trial level court. Then if they end up having to appeal, it goes to the appellate level. And then, only then, if it gets appealed again, would it go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And of course, the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't take everything. They take very few cases, actually. But that's kind of the process that a case will go through is that three-tiered court system. Now, the U.S. Courts of Appeals, see that middle level there? I wanted to show you a map of that. So these are the appellate courts. You can see that we're in the 8th Circuit there. I don't know if you've ever been there, but we were lucky, law librarian, nerdy lucky, I guess, that the 8th Circuit Courts of Appeal is in St. Louis. So you can see all the states there. So we just kind of got lucky that it's actually located in Missouri because it's for all of those states that you see in green. It's a beautiful building in St. Louis, beautiful library. So that is something that if you ever have a chance to see is quite neat, quite cool. So anyway, that's kind of the circuits. And then just show you this. It's not anything I think anyone could remember, but basically just wanted to show you that each of these courts, when they have opinions that are published, these are the reporters. Reporters report opinions, okay? So these are the reporters, the books, that the judge's opinions will end up in. So at that trial level, probably not very many get published at that level, but they'll end up in a book called the Federal Supplement. And you see the Federal Reporter at the appellate level. The U.S. Supreme Court, of course, that's so important. It seems to get 3 reporters. But the U.S. site, the U.S. Reporter is the official reporter. The other 2 are published by commercial vendors and have some added value in them as a result. But just to kind of give you a sense of the citations that you might see with the case reporters. And then, of course, this one looks really like an overly complicated slide, but a lot more detail than you probably need here. But this is the Missouri court system. So at the circuit court level, that's the Boone County Courthouse, with the columns that we've got here in Columbia. And then the Court of Appeals, those end up in Springfield and Kansas City and in St. Louis. And then the the Missouri Supreme Court is in Jeff City. Okay, how are the court's materials organized in Missouri? Any cases that get published end up in what's called the Southwestern Reporter. Now, interestingly, and I think if you thought about this, it makes sense. Trial courts, nothing gets published there. I mean, think about the Boone County Courthouse and every DUI that's in there, every little thing that would go on at that. There's no way that they can publish that. Yet a lot of times that might be the headline story, and people kind of want to know about whatever the headline story is. But it may not end up in a law library because those are jury trials and the jury decides it, not a judge. So it's only when it gets to the Court of Appeals level or the Supreme Court level that you'll end up with something in actually that gets published that you can cite to. Okay, how do you find this stuff? That's the big question, all right? I would say first ask yourself, what do you already know? Because if I can start with some information, I can use that information to find more information. And so if I've had the article that I've found on nursing home arbitration or whatever, and that'll give me some of these clues. So if I've got a case to start with. Keyword searching is absolutely not the best way to start, even though it's every one of our, first instinct is to go to a case law database and throw in my words. Everybody wants to do that. Who wouldn't? But it's the least effective. I've read statistics that show something like it'll pull back sort of 20 to 29% of the material that's relevant. So it's not to say you can't do it, not to say you can't have some success with it, but it's just not the most effective way. So let's just talk about an effective approach that you could take. And we've already looked at Hein Online, so just to be different, I'm going to look at Google Scholar, and I'm going to throw in a topic this time. Let's say we are searching we're interested in public education rights for undocumented children. I throw that into Google Scholar. I could have thrown that into Hein Online as well, all right? But let's say I just did Google Scholar, and you know, honestly, I did not pick this one because I got so lucky, but I just couldn't, I was like so amazed at the results, because when you look at this, it may not pop out to you right away, but it popped out to me right away that I got the seminal case on this. Plyler v. Doe happens to be a case that was actually from the 80s, but it went up to the Supreme Court, and that's the case, came out of Texas, where some Mexican children, someone brought suit for them, gave them said that they had the constitutional right, if they were within our borders, to have public education, that that was just kind of a right. And so that's actually a great thing for me to start my research with. So I opened up that article and I got the citation to that case. And so now, again, I'm in the law library now, and I'm on that Westlaw terminal, and I'm going to type in the citation, which was 102 Supreme Court, and it was 2382. And that's our Plyler case. And I just want to show you, so just think in terms of if you have a case that's on topic and why it might be worth your while to come and use the Westlaw terminal that's at the law library. Because I can guarantee you could find this case for free on the internet, because all those US Supreme Court cases are out there. But first of all, when I pull this case up on Westlaw, I get the synopsis here, and then I get something called head notes. There's actually 40 head notes. This I would not find for free on the internet. These are editorial enhancements. Basically, there are 40 head notes. There's 40 points of law that an editor has decided that are important points of law in this case. And so that's kind of cool. It helps me to analyze that case. You know, those are all of the important points of law, and you just go on and on. And you can search on that stuff. I could search on this for other cases that have that same point of law. So then you have to go way down, because I'm sorry for this is making me crazy. All right, then you get to the syllabus of the case, of the attorneys that worked on that case. Now here we go, there's the opinion. Justice Brennan has delivered the opinion to the court. So look how far we had to go down before we got to the opinion, and that's what you would find for free on the internet, is just the opinion. So you get those added value. So not only do you have the head notes, but you also have all these tabs. I don't know how well you can see them if you're in the room. You might be able to see them on the computer better. But see the citing references tab? Oh my goodness. This has got, because this is a Supreme Court case, all right? So there's more than other cases would have. But there have been 2,732 cases that have cited that case. And so I could kind of go in and work with those. There's so much depth here. You can see this case is saying it deals particularly with these head note numbers, those points of law that were in, you know, I mean, it's so detailed that you can get with how you kind of categorize the way that the citations have worked for this case. I can get to all of the secondary sources. So I could click here, and these are all the types of secondary sources or articles, ALR articles, law review articles, journals that have talked in some way about the Plyler case. So my point is this. If you have something to start with, you know about a case that is on point, use that to launch your research. Pull it up on Westlaw, look at the citing references. You'll probably find more than you want that is related, more cases that are related to that case. Okay, so that is a lot, all right? But we just looked at taking a secondary source and then going to a citation that was in that source and using that to find other cases as well. See if there was anything else that I wanted. There was one other thing, and I kind of left my site. So let's go back to Westlaw, and we'll just show you. We'll just do the same thing. I'm just going to do the big box search here. Public education for undocumented children. And so this is throwing it out for all content. So I'm going to narrow it down filter down on the left-hand side to secondary sources. And there I've got, you can see law reviews are coming up. There are all kinds of law reviews articles on this. So basically just saying that you can go also to Westlaw to look for secondary sources that will then lead you to more of the case law information. So cases are probably the most challenging to identify. I would really not recommend at all trying to find case law on point just by using the internet. Only I think if you got into a secondary source, because it's just, whereas statutes, we're going to look at that in a minute, they're pretty good on the internet. With, the Jeff City's put up the Missouri statutes, the US government's done that. Cases, there's so many of them. There's just so many of them. You really need something to help you get to the ones that are on point with your topic. Okay, so that's case law. We're getting there. Everybody hanging with me? This is a lot of me talking. So, all right. So we looked at cases. Now let's look at the legislative branch and thinking about statutory law, which is, we've got Jeff City. They're making statutes in Jeff City for our state. In DC, they're passing laws, and that's where our federal statutes will come out. So in terms of publications, the United States Code is available for free on the internet, and nothing wrong with using that. There are annotated versions that again, commercial publishers have done, and they've added value to those. And those are the ones that you're not going to get for free on the internet. So I am going to show you a little bit about that with what you would see on what we do have access to via Westlaw. So you've got your federal statutes, and then you've got your Missouri statutes. And let's just take a look. Actually, we'll go ahead and click on this one. This is, oh my goodness, no fishing. I don't know quite where that ended up. So that was not where we were intended to go. Here we go. All right. Revisor of statutes for Missouri. So let's say, and again, you can just kind of Google Missouri statutes or Missouri General Assembly. Will get you to this information. And you can browse through these to try to get, if you knew you were wanting to look at the tax statutes, you could just sort of work it like a book. And the interesting thing about statutes is that when you're in an arrangement like this, they're arranged by subject. So it's kind of like, this is one thing where I still kind of like the books. I can't help it because, if I open up to a particular family law section or whatever I'm interested in, I know that if I flip the page, that's related because they've aggregated them by topic. And so I might sort of browse upon something that I didn't think about looking for. So I do like, you can do that. You can do that online, but sometimes it's nice to look at it in the books. But let's say that I was interested. We'll go back to that topic of grandparent visitation. So I'm just going to type in grandparent visitation and see what Missouri has about that. And we do have a statute here, 452-402. I'm going to copy that if I can. Okay, so I could read all about that. You can see, interestingly, it even tells me the history of kind of all of the laws that kind of amended that statute. Sometimes knowing the history of a law is important. I can follow those numbers. I could help you with that if you ever need to do something like that. And we could find out how this law was when it was first introduced in '77 all the way up to all the changes along the way. Okay, so you can look at that on the internet, and that actually works pretty well. But if you really wanted to get into some more in-depth on this and wanted to go to an annotated version, I could type in, I'm going to type in RISMO, Revised Statutes of Missouri, so Westlaw knows what citation I'm putting there, and search for that. And let's look at the difference of what we see on Westlaw. So we've got here the same stuff that we had on the Missouri government webpage, all the credits and all of that. Then we've got these tabs. So notice here, notes of decisions. These are all kind of an organized outline. I could click on best interests of child. These are all of the cases that have cited that particular section of the Missouri statute. Wow, how helpful is that? If you know you have a statutory issue, you could go to it and get all of the cases that have cited it. Then the citing references tab, we looked at that a while ago on the Plyler case, gets all of the cases. Again, well, it's kind of a different way of getting it, all the cases that have cited it, all of the secondary sources, some ALR articles that might provide added information about grandparent. Who knew there was so much to know about grandparent visitation rights? All right, there's a lot. So I guess I'm saying that I think it's okay to do statutory search on the internet because there's good government websites for that. But I think if you want the added value, you want more of that information, then come by the law library and take the sites that you found online and look them up on that Westlaw terminal. Okay, so we've kind of talked about this, how we go about finding these statutes. One thing I wanted to speak to is the historical question, because that gets a little tough. If you want to know, and we get a lot of people who are, you know, I need to know the slave, you know, laws from Missouri, I just helped someone in our rare book room with 1866. I mean, some of it we have to go into print, but a lot of that we have digitized and things like that. So I did want to show you the databases. I'm going to go again to our page and online resources by subject, and then we've got a category here for legislative materials. A lot of information there. A lot of this stuff I use for legislative history research, which I end up doing a lot in my library. But we also have a sessions laws library. Not an easy way to do research, but basically every time a law gets passed at the state level, it's like this is more of a chronological arrangement of the law, not the subject like I was saying, but we have that for all 50 states. Here we have a state statutes, a historical archive, and I'll click on M for should get us somewhere close to Missouri. I was in here just the other day helping, there we go. So you can see we've got 1881, and you know we've got a lot of the historical stuff there. And then let's see, I'm sorry, I lost my site. So anyway, we've got some of the databases that are specialized that will help you with doing historical research. So. Any questions about the statutory stuff? We're coming to a close here. Yes?
So you said there's federal and state, but where does local law?
Good question. The question is, we were talked about federal and state, but what about local law? I debated on that. I was like, do I put that in? Because we've also even got like Mizzou has its own ordinances. So in thinking about jurisdiction, you know, it's not, you're right. It's not just federal and state. It's, and the city ordinances, you really have to go on the city websites for that. So I just Google, and there's county ordinances and there's city ordinances. And your best bet is, we used to keep like the Columbia city ordinances, and they would never get updated. And I mean, you're better off looking at the website for those. And it's tricky. There is not, we have tried actually to subscribe. There is a database called MuniCode. If you have to do a lot of this, because we subscribed to it for a short period of time for a professor who was doing a lot of something project with that. But it wasn't that, well, I shouldn't say this online. It was a long time ago, and it didn't necessarily cover everything. It seems like you just have to go to the websites. You almost have to Google them. It's not a...
And they're probably not good secondary.
Newspaper articles is about all I could think about with that. You know, you have to, that's the kind of thing you have to get creative with, but good question, good question. Okay, regulatory law. This is coming out of the executive branch. I always kind of like to say, this is my little story, and this is about all I'll say about regulations for now. This is a very heavy topic. I'm happy to meet with people on this one because regulatory law is a big deal. And I always try to tell law students, kind of like, it has the force of law, but so let's think about nuclear plants. Congress might make a law about where they're going to have a nuclear power plant in Fulton. Okay, I trust them to make that law, though, maybe. But you know, anyway, we'll give them that. Okay, but do we want our senators and representatives telling us making the laws and the rules about how to store radioactive waste. No way, you do not. So what happens, the way it works, is Congress designates the power to an agency who hopefully have the expertise, Department of Energy, to do that kind of thing. So it's the power of law, even though we didn't sort of vote the people in that make that law. And that ends up at the federal level in the Code of Federal Regulations, which is, you can do that fine on the internet. We do now more and more in the last few years, the Westlaw version of it. There is some annotations. It'd be worth your while to go and look at that. Code of State Regulations, just look at it on the internet, and that's as best as you can get really with anything. So, so where do you go? We kind of talked about these things, hopefully emphasized enough that the background information is where I get started. Interestingly, I didn't talk about this. Wills and power of attorney kind of get into the personal, you might have missed this, the personal reasons you might, everyone needs a lawyer at some point in their life for one reason or another. And if it's a simple thing where you think you can handle it yourself, and hardly anything simple, quite frankly, I recommend a lawyer for anything. The more I know you don't want me giving legal advice because it's complicated. Everything is complicated. But I did look at, see if I have a slide on it. I do. Daniel Boone Regional Library has actually a terrific little resource. I didn't do all the screenshots. I think it's called Gale Legal Forms. And, you know, there's a lot there. You just need a general power of attorney or whatever, and you have a Daniel Boone library card. It's just something I wanted to remind you of. Wherever you are, public libraries, they just do a pretty darn good job of helping us out as well. Love our public library. So if you go away with anything today, I hope that you go away with, I'd love for you to visit our library. If you need to do legal research, I would love to sit down and help you one-on-one. And I hope to see you there. So thank you all for coming. Are we off?